Hi, this is Andy. Have you ever noticed how two people can go through something similar? I mean, for one person, it takes them under, and the other person, they seem to find a way to get past it and maybe even grow from it. I ask because going through challenging, even traumatic experiences, it's part of the human experience. And I'm not saying it's equally distributed, but clearly life is not always up and to the right. And as you grow as a leader, it's only a matter of time before you're put into situations that can cause you to question your abilities and wonder if you're up to it and maybe even back down from the challenge. Or, interestingly, those situations may be what propel you forward in your ability to lead and deliver. Well, today we're exploring the role of experience and how it shapes us as individuals and as leaders. And I'm excited to introduce you to a new book entitled Experiential Intelligence: Harness the Power of Experience for Personal and Business Breakthroughs by Soren Kaplan. In today's discussion, you'll learn about XQ, Experiential Intelligence, and how it compares to IQ and EQ and other attempts to understand our intelligences. Soren will talk about self-limiting beliefs and how we can identify them and, more importantly, get beyond them. It's a great discussion with a guy who has a passion for helping us turn our past experiences into assets for our good as individuals and for teams, and I can't wait to share this with you. Hey, but first, you've heard me talking in recent episodes about our new course entitled AI Made Simple, a practical guide to using AI in your everyday work. Well, the feedback from learners has been so rewarding. It's a course specifically designed for project managers and leaders like you, wondering what's real and what's just hype when it comes to using AI in your everyday work. This course is a great next step to help you stay ahead of the curve, so learn more and join so many other podcast listeners by going to ai.peopleandprojectspodcast.com. Thanks. Let's jump into today's discussion with Soren about his new book, Experiential Intelligence. So Soren, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Great to be here, Andy.
All right, so we have IQ and EQ, and Howard Gardner challenged some of the current notions with his multiple intelligences. So now we have experiential intelligence, XQ. So I'd love to hear how you describe what experiential intelligence is and how it fits into the landscape of these other intelligences.
Sure. Well, we've known IQ is important and something that leads to success. That's your intellect, how you solve problems. We've known that emotional intelligence, that was introduced by Dan Goleman 30 years ago or so. How in touch you are with your own emotions as well as the emotions of others, like on your team, that's a success factor. But in today's disruptive world where things are changing faster than ever before, you've got technology disruption, now you have artificial intelligence, we haven't had a way, or we haven't codified a way really, to understand how our experiences, not just in business, but in life, actually contribute to a form of intelligence that allows us to be successful. Now, we've had kind of informal terms like street smarts or the 10,000 hour rule that says if you just do something a lot, you get, some skills. But it's more than just some base skills. We're really talking about a form of, like street smarts, intelligence around how to navigate the world and how to be successful. And experience, I think we all have experiences from the moment we're born. What experiential intelligence is doing is it's really adding a way to understand the third leg of the intelligence stool that we've all been sitting on, but really haven't appreciated and recognized until now.
Yeah, I really love that metaphor that it's not a question of whether it was there or not. We just haven't realized how that's maybe contributed to our IQ and our EQ. I think that makes sense from the landscape perspective. A major theme in your book is the role of our mindsets and how we view situations and the world around us. So I'd love for you to tell us about this relationship between experiences and mindsets, attitudes and beliefs, and how they hold us or help us or hold us back from our full potential.
Let me bring the whole concept of experiential intelligence to light and probably an example outside of business that most of us can relate to, which is riding a bike. So I'm assuming, Andy, you learned how to ride a bike at some point.
Absolutely.
So did I. So, most of us do. And how do you learn how to ride a bike? You don't read a manual. You might you might get help from a parent or a friend, but really you have to try it out. It's about experiential learning. You might start out with some training wheels. You might take off a training wheel. You might fall over a little bit and get back up. So over time, over a short period of time, you learn how to ride a bike. Now, what does that instill in? What are those experiences of riding a bike instill in you? It instills know-how. You know how to balance. You know how to steer, handlebars. You can brake. That's your base knowledge and skills. You also develop higher order abilities like the ability to anticipate bumps or ride defensively in traffic. That's not a skill. It's a really higher order ability. But then you also develop mindsets. And that's what you asked about. But all three of those things are connected. So mindsets. Even excellent riders need to be cautious around cars as a mindset. Or bikes are opportunities for transportation, but also I might look at it as socializing or adventure. So, I'm a mountain biker. So, you can, thrill seeking. So the idea that you might have different ways to look at a bike and understand it for yourself is a mindset, your attitude and belief about it. And so let's just give an example. If you have fallen over and maybe you were embarrassed in front of friends, you might have a mindset develop that this could be dangerous. This is embarrassing and it's an opportunity to be embarrassed. And so I want to stay away from riding bikes. So your mindsets can either be self-limiting, like in those cases, or self-expanding if you see it as really just an opportunity. And so we can have different experiences. Some people might be embarrassed and not worry about it. Other people might be embarrassed and have really internalized that mindset. So it goes back to how you opened up your show here. We can have similar experiences, but we can internalize it differently. But experiential intelligence is about know-how, abilities, and mindsets. And our experiences instill those three things in all of us, pretty much no matter what those are.
I love to cycle for exercise, Soren. And the guy that got me into it, he goes, it's just a matter of time before you fall. He goes, yeah, you're going to fall. I'm like, no, I'm going to be the guy that's not going to do it. And so I did not too long after going. But my second time I fell on a bike, it was because of him. He ran into me. And so my experiences shaped the mindset that, hey, you know what? This is great exercise, but you need to have caution. I think without the experience of going through those first two falls, I would have thought, hey, this is like when I was a kid riding a bike. In Walnut Creek, I think you were talking about when you're riding a bike. No. This is a whole different thing, riding a bike in Chicago. And those experiences shaped my mindset of safety and the attitudes and beliefs about being more aware of what are cars doing and turn signals and things like that. But that's kind of how it works, right? Experiences shape mindsets. Then we have attitudes and beliefs. And someone could have equally had someone, like, for example, when I was like 5th or 6th grade, I had a friend who died in a private airplane crash. Okay. And before then, I wanted to be a pilot. But after that thing happened, that experience of him in a plane that I'd been in him with before, it changed it completely. That, like, I wouldn't say they're not safe, but it has completely changed my view of that. And I wouldn't say that's rational, but that's changed how I think. That's a mindset I have now because of that.
It is. And I think that when we look at the experiences that we have in life, it's multidimensional. There's psychology involved, there's sociology involved, there can be business involved and leadership involved and just self-awareness involved. And so, there's a lot of factors that shape how we respond to the experiences that we have. So, you read my book, and you mentioned it as we were coming on. I had a traumatic childhood. I had, a father who was rarely around. My mother developed a mental illness when I was 3 years old, and we moved 16 times before I was 15 years old. Now, those same traumatic experiences, which I had to heal from in a number of ways, also instilled some strengths. Like, I'm really good with navigating uncertainty and living with ambiguity. I've done some startups. That's been really helpful there. I am pretty resilient and adaptable based on different situations. I know how to read body language and kind of decipher the room. And that's helped with my leadership development and working in organizational cultures and deciphering and analyzing culture. So the same things that can really impact us negatively can at the same time, not despite them, but because of them, develop strengths. And that's what if we really get in touch with the experiences that we have in life and in business, we can see both sides of those oftentimes and overcome the self-limiting beliefs and lean into and leverage those self-expanding strengths that those experiences give to us.
Yeah. I feel like I'm learning more every year, Soren, about what trauma is and how it impacts us. But I learned just enough to realize how little I know. Like you mentioned Bruce Perry's book that he did with Oprah in your book, but I'd read his other book, or at least one of his other books, The Boy Who's Raised as a Dog. And I feel like I learned so much by reading the book. So many things I learned out of that book. But before we talk about developing our experiential intelligence, I'd love to ask you this. What are some of the most important lessons you've learned about trauma? Because I'm going to guess people listening to us are going to be in the same boat, that they know some, but we have a lot to learn. And, maybe some things that you've learned that most of us don't appreciate or just know about.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the streams of research today, and it's in Bruce Perry's book, as well as a great book called The Body Keeps the Score, is that the things that happen to us in life can actually wire us neurologically.
Yeah. So
so that, let's say I had a parent who is sharply critical to me. I mean, that's not necessarily an individual single event, but it can be traumatic over a series of events and over time. Well, I can get wired so that if I experience criticism and it conjures up those responses from my childhood, I might show a facial expression or have a reaction when my manager is just giving me constructive feedback. And so the traumas that wire me neurologically can get in my way later in life in ways that I might not even be aware. So I call those kind of little impacts or little traumas. But then there's the bigger stuff where, that one event that you mentioned where you had, a friend and there was a airplane, accident. That's a single event. It had an impact on you around fear of flying or, kind of directed where you kind of probably a fear response. Mm-hmm. And so you can look at big events, you can look at little events, but those things, they can wire us to respond in certain ways to future events that have nothing to do objectively with that thing. And so we're responding based on old programming is the point. And I think that's really an important thing to understand, that we're not dysfunctional people. It's just that we've gotten, we've had some impacts and now we can heal from them. And the flip side of healing is growth also. So as we look at the things that have negatively perhaps impacted us and we heal from them, it just opens up a whole new world to say, okay, now what are my opportunities to do things differently in a new way now that those things aren't constraining me?
Thank you. I appreciate how you explain that. I feel like you hear about post-traumatic stress a lot. I'd never heard the term post-traumatic growth until I heard your book. In fact, my first thought when I read it was, I wonder if people feel like that is insensitive. But the truth is, you see it all the time where some people go through that. I think in that section where you talk about trauma, experiences are relative. And sometimes people take that and it is truly this opportunity for growth. And so there's like a whole area of study, if I remember from your book, right? Post-traumatic growth.
There's research on post-traumatic growth that basically shows that some people, not everyone, but some people who maybe experience a significant health event, cancer or the death of a loved one, use that as an opportunity. And it's not always conscious, but experience that as an opportunity to reevaluate what's important in life. How am I living my life? What am I doing based on that really jarring traumatic experience? And it's an opportunity for growth, and that's why it's called post-traumatic growth. Mm-hmm. And so there's, you can look at trauma as creating some challenges or instilling things that need to be healed from. But some people, and that research is showing, are able to come out the other side much stronger with greater purpose and greater effectiveness in whatever they're deciding to do.
I mean, in some ways, you're a perfect example of it, right? I mean, you already explained how learning to read the room at home, so to speak, has helped you learn to read the room in business and things like that. Can you think of any other examples of people you've worked with about how they took what? Because it seems like growing in our XQ really requires us to look for what are some unrealized assets that we already possess, or maybe we've developed because of our experiences, and learn to leverage those. Can you think of another example of somebody you've worked with that this was their situation and how they overcame it?
I have lots of examples, and the simplest way that anyone can uncover this is to ask anyone that you work with or that you know, what are the experiences in life that most shaped you and gave you strengths? And you'll learn a lot from that question. And so I asked that question to a client of mine. She was running marketing. She was chief marketing officer of the international business at Hershey. And I asked her she was named one of the top 40 CMOs in the country. So I said, okay, how did great distinction. What led to this success? Think about something outside of your schooling or outside of your current work role. And she said, oh, that's easy. She said, I learned to play violin early on, and I played it in an orchestra. And I said, well, explain that to me. And she said that she had to get extremely focused and excellent at her craft. She needed to work with other people, those she was playing with, and take the lead sometimes, but step back sometimes. And that taught her how to, be in teams and lead teams, but also let the team run with what they needed to run with. And so, playing the violin and that experience of composing also and being creative as well as focus gave her what she needed to learn how to work with teams at Hershey and drive innovation and operate in a way that formal business school didn't give her, apparently, or complemented what she got in business school. So, that's a quick example. And we all have, we can all probably answer that question for ourselves. And then we could all probably ask others that question and uncover a lot that usually is flying under the radar in terms of how we are operating in the world and what's leading to our success, really.
Yeah. Upon reflection, because your book caused a lot of reflection, I think of a really difficult boss I worked for a while. And I used to say that this was the best boss I ever hated to work for. That's the way I characterize the person. But upon reflection, going through this situation with a truly, what I felt like was a terrible boss, overly demanding, I could and use a lot of hyperbole to explain it. The truth is, that boss toughened me up in ways I needed to. And there's no way I could be running my own company these days if I didn't go through that experience. And was it really trauma? Not compared to what most people go through, but these difficult situations actually really did prepare me for the next step, even though I never would have chosen it. I'd imagine that's how this works, right?
It is. And this doesn't have to be, you mentioned trauma kind of out of the gate as something to explore. And it is a big factor in some of the experiences that shape us. But here's another example in my own life. I was probably 17 and I went to go buy a car with my father. He was helping me, figure out how to navigate that process. And we went into a dealership that we didn't know it at the time, notorious for bait and switch tactics. And it was a 15-minute, extremely uncomfortable situation for me. And I just sat there. I was just observing my father getting tense and just that interaction. Yeah. I took away two things. One was a self-limiting belief that has gotten in my way that I've had to work on, which are salespeople can't be trusted. That I internalized that in those 15 minutes, and it got in my way in terms of just regular daily interactions with people who are trying to help me out. I felt a little tense at times, and I'm probably not that pleasant. Or in my strategic partnership conversations, I'm always a little bit reticent and hesitant when I'm engaging. Now, at the same time, I also instilled a mindset that I need to understand the deeper motivations of people when I'm interacting with them. And that's been an enabler to customer research and innovation insights work to come up with new products, and my desire to understand other cultures and work cross-culturally with teams. And so the same experience that I don't think anyone would call that trauma necessarily, but that same impact can have multiple facets to it in terms of how what I internalized. And so little things that may seemingly be, flying under the radar and you don't think about very much, if you step back and you reflect and you understand the things that have been shaping you or shaped you, things that you just remember. I call them visceral memories. Anything that brings up joy or brings up a little pain or a discomfort or shame or whatever they are, there's probably something in there. And so those little things can give you some big insight.
Yeah, even as you're saying that, I'm thinking about the movie Inside Out. Like when you watch that, does that kind of resonate with what you do? Oh, that was a core memory or whatever it was in that movie. Yeah. I'm quite sure I've got more self-limiting beliefs than I realize. So, as a way of understanding this, let's do some work on me here, Soren. So, I can truthfully say this is not as much of an issue now, although it is probably just more than I want to even admit. But especially early in my career, I felt like I needed to be liked. Okay. I needed to be liked. And the reason I bring this up is I think this is something that's rather common in, growing leaders. And the thing is, leadership is not a popularity contest. And so you have so many good tools in the book, like your XQ snapshot. So I'm wondering if you could walk me through the XQ snapshot to maybe get perhaps a sense of where this need came from. Are you up for that?
Yeah, let's do it. So let's talk about that. So think about some of the experiences that you had that impacted you, and perhaps a time in which you experienced not being liked or being judged in some way, or you just walked away from it, feeling like you weren't worthy of whatever was going on. Like what were some of those maybe examples that you can think of?
Yeah, because you start with experiences, right? And so when I was kind of going through that snapshot, I was thinking of, like, I was never bullied as a kid, but I do remember in grade school, like a couple specific times. I probably don't remember anything else from that year, but I remember a couple times being made fun of, and just like the I don't like this. Yeah. It wasn't often, but just being made fun of, and it was memorable enough that I was wondering if that kind of led to the next step on the mindsets, right?
Yeah. So the snapshot, as you talk about the tool, starts with experiences. So you sort of inventory a few experiences that are, resonate with in your memory. Then you look at the mindsets that they helped instill to you, and they can be self-limiting or they can be expanding. It doesn't have to all be negative. It can be very positive. And then you look at, based on that mindset, what did you do in life based on that mindset that has led to abilities or specific skills that you've got, your know-how, knowledge. And so let's take that. So let's say you had some experiences where you were made fun of. Yeah. What would you say you took away from that in terms of a belief or an attitude about, that experience?
All right. So upon reflection, this is where I kind of got down on it when I was doing the snapshot. I think where I came down to is, if I can be your friend, you won't make fun of me. All right. So this ability to I'll be liked if I'm just liked, I'll be your friend. So this mindset that be on their team, they won't make fun of you if you're their friend. All right.
Okay, so what did you do to become people's friends? How did you ensure that people you were coming across, in school or life or business would be your friend or would want to be your friend? What did you do? How did you do that?
So what I felt like was, I think I started honing in on, how do you make people comfortable? How do you get people to laugh? How do you get people to, get along and be likable? So be others focused, something like that. So I think I developed an ability, and not just because that one time in sixth grade, but I think in general, I think that was an ability that was that was developed. And then I guess the next one is the know-how, right? And I took it that as, I just learned how to ask questions of people to learn more about themselves. So because people like to talk about themselves, and I'm interested in other people. So I think if I understand the method, right, asking questions is a specific skill, I guess we could say, or knowledge, and that's a know-how that could lead to this other stuff, lead to the other stuff, right?
Yeah. So let's trace that across. You had an experience, and I say across because it's a little tool that it's a matrix in a sense. Experiences to mindsets to abilities to know-how. Trace it across. You got made fun of in sixth grade once or twice.
Yeah.
You had a mindset that if you developed friendships or you created friendships, you wouldn't get made fun of and you'd avoid that pain, or you'd create the opposite of that, which is that connection that you want that you maybe didn't have in that moment. Then because of that, you practiced asking questions and connecting with other people and listening, which gave you an ability also, which kind of goes hand in hand, to empathize and to communicate well and to create that comfortable environment for other people to feel safe. So you can see how certain mindsets lead to the behavior that you had and developed abilities. Now, here's the question. How do you apply today as an adult, successful, in your work life or your personal life, those abilities? Your mindset really is, if I make people comfortable and I create connection with them, I will be able to, do things in my life with people that feel good to me and feel good to them. So how have you applied all that, those, mindset skills and abilities, to what you do today?
Yeah, I have no question that it applies even to what you and I are doing right now. So when it comes to interviewing people, when it comes to the podcast, when it comes to working with coaching clients, of getting them comfortable enough so they're willing to open up. When I'm speaking in audiences, it's usually very interactive, and it's how to make them comfortable, how to make them feel like they can laugh and enjoy the experience. I have no doubt that it applies, if not daily, almost daily.
I would agree with that. And clearly you have self-awareness of your own process and your own abilities in this way. A lot of people apply those things, but don't necessarily reflect back on what they're doing and why, which means that, if you just inventory all those things you just listed, you could say, I can take those and I can do other things with them. I can innovate a new social media platform or program or whatever it is, because I can leverage these things, or I can, turn my speaking into a leadership development program because I can create these experiences for people. So being conscious of that interplay and how all those things connect allow you to, one, heal from the stuff you want to heal from, but also leverage the things that you're just good at that maybe you're not fully aware of, that then you can take and use to do the next thing you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think by going through the snapshot, people can find all kinds of things. I mean, I look back, and my dad was a bricklayer, and he told me once, if I don't work, we don't get paid. We can go on vacation, but I don't get paid. And I could think of that experience and how that led to, man, you got to work hard. Yeah. And if my dad was absent, he was only because he was working, and he would come back and play catch with me. And so I had I had a great dad experience, but I've just in the last year realized, I wonder if some of my taking on some engagements when I really should just say no. I don't really need to take on that engagement. Is that same, the thing I got from the bricklayer thing. And so it was on the stool, it was one of the legs of the stool under me, just under there, but being aware of it, they can say, hey, you know what? I can be more free to say no to that same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's a great example. I grew up with very few resources myself, and I've oftentimes said yes to too much, and that created imbalance. Yeah. And so that's another great example of that. And so, there can be a deeper psychological component to this, but there really doesn't have to be, because, if you just say, here are the experiences I had, here's how they impacted me, you might have one level of, you might be able to kind of fill out that snapshot template. But at the same time, if you share that with somebody who really knows you, they can help you see yourself also in a more, holistic light. And then if you're, if you're working, let's say you're on a project and you're working with a team. I just did a session with 100 people in the room where he had people come in and basically share with pairs, here are the experiences that most shaped me and gave me my strengths that I'm applying to my work today. Like, that's experiential intelligence right there in a really simple way. And you can see people reveal themselves. And then if you know that person, you can reflect back to them. And there's a lot of self-insight that can happen there. And so without like a heavy lift of years of therapy or, doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So it doesn't have to be rocket science.
No, I love that. It's a lot cheaper than therapy. And you're also, you nothing in the book was like anti-therapy, but is also, you don't have to do that. Some of this you can get. And I love that question. I want to make sure people get it. What are some of the experiences that have most shaped you and your strengths? Was it? How'd you say it?
And given you strengths.
Yeah.
It's I try to anchor this in what's the field of positive psychology, which is really, and it's the book and how I talk about it is very balanced. But when at the end of the day, if you're trying to apply it to achieve your goals, whether it's personally or professionally or as a team or organization, a big opportunity is to uncover hidden strengths that you have or that your team has that are going untapped. So, if somebody has had experiences working in other culture and you happen to have, that other culture, you're building products for a certain market segment that connects to that culture or whatever, there's real assets there that might not be on a resume. And so that's the real opportunity is to, from a positive psychology standpoint, going back to your question, what are the experiences you've had in life or business that, have given you the real strengths that you can build on for the future. And that's really the essence of it.
Yeah, very practical. Yeah, and some of those will be good experiences, right? And some of those will be difficult experiences, but it can spur on the thinking. What are some examples of self-limiting beliefs that you've seen with leaders that you've worked with? And if someone listening to us wanted to get better at identifying those in their own lives, what would you recommend?
I see a lot of leaders feeling like they have to be perfect. They always have to have the right answer. So I have to have the right answer. So that I can be a good leader is a self-limiting belief. And so, that's, I think, a challenge for a lot of leaders, because what that does is it limits their ability to recognize there's a lot of inherent uncertainty in leading. There's surrounding yourself with a team who's smarter than you actually is a great leadership trait, smarter in terms of experience, as well as maybe, knowing how to do certain things so that you can create a robust team. The leader doesn't have to have all the answers. And so, there's some, I think, mythologies of leadership that you have to be the smartest person in the room, that you have to have all the answers. One leader that I worked with, I think had a positive belief. It wasn't a self-limiting belief. It was a self-expanding belief that individual knew how to recognize opportunities. He said, I need to be able to, and I know how to recognize opportunities. And so what that meant was he'd allow the team to come up with all these crazy ideas, share them, create an environment where the team's really open and sharing. And then he was able to recognize the ideas that would have traction with customers. And then they could work together that way. And so, those self-limiting beliefs can get in the way, but it's as equally important to understand your self-expanding beliefs too, so you can use those for yourself and make the team aware of what your own, what you're also good at as a leader.
Any patterns or that we could pick up on of like, man, I wonder if that's a self-limiting belief. I mean, just either a question or a sense, and maybe it can't be generalized to that degree, but I'm just wondering, is there anything that you found is, I just wonder.
I've done a lot of work in innovation, helping teams come up with new products and services and create cultures of innovation. Here's a few that I hear a lot. I can't do anything else until I have more data. That is a self-limiting belief because it feels too risky. And so that's the self-limiting belief is I can't take more risk until I have more data to reduce my, my risk profile in this project or whatever. Now, maybe that can be true, but usually if you're dealing with something that's uncertain, you're going to move too slow if you wait until you have all the data. So I see that self-limiting belief get in the way of a lot of people. Another one, we can't do that now because we tried it before and it didn't work. Mm-hmm. And so that self-limiting belief is based on the idea that things don't change, that the world hasn't changed. Like, well, maybe it's a different context. So those are a couple of things that I see leaders can instill in themselves and not recognizing themselves, and that it infects a team, so that the team then isn't moving fast because they need, endless data and they need to go do research, and they never make decisions, or they don't recognize that they've learned things and that context may change and it can still apply, their history of experience to this new thing. They don't have to dismiss, throw the baby out with the bathwater. So that's, those are two biggies that I see.
Yeah. I wonder if I'm trying to abstract out whenever I say I can't or we can't, maybe that's just something that if I pick up on it, just that might be a trigger. It's like, just real quick, is that, and it might be a statement of truth, but it also just be aware of that. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I was intrigued by the idea of relationship loops. I'd never heard it quite that way before, and how they relate to growing XQ. Can you think of a business example of a negative relationship loop and, maybe a way to turn that into a positive one?
Well, let's talk about how loops work and what they are. So, in relationships, we oftentimes see patterns evolve, and sometimes those patterns are not always explicit to us. And those patterns can happen in our personal relationships, they can happen in families, and they can happen in teams. So, a relationship loop is essentially a pattern in which I think something, or I experience something, and I'm interpreting that. And so I behave based on my interpretation. Mm-hmm. And based on how I behave, someone else who I'm interacting with sees my behavior, and they're interpreting it based on their previous experience and mindsets. Then they behave in a certain way. And so you can have real negative loops where, there may be, for example, let's just keep running with the example that I gave to you. We can't do anything else without any data. So if I have that, if I hold that as a mindset, and I see someone give a presentation and there's not absolute clarity substantiated with irrefutable data, I might think, I can't make a decision with this. There's too much uncertainty. That's my self-limiting belief. And then I go to a behavior, which is either verbally saying, wait a minute, we need more data here. Or I might even viscerally or physically look displeased. And I might even have, if I'm feeling a lot of risk, because, I'm the leader, I have to make decisions based on this presentation and I can't do it, I might get angry or upset. Mm-hmm. Now, if I show those behaviors, that person who just gave me the presentation is going to be thinking in their mind, whatever their self-limiting belief is, like, oh, I need to be perfect for my manager and I just messed up. I'm not a good person, or I can never please them. Like, there might be certain things that are coming up, and then the behavior on that would be some type of interaction about this presentation. There could be defensiveness. There could be, a feeling of hopelessness. I'm never going to be able to collect this data. We're never going to move forward. And it can instill itself in the relationship as kind of a negative feedback loop. Or if there's a team involved, you create a sense in the team that we're never going to be able to satisfy our leader, and we're never going to be able to make decisions, and why even bother? We're never going to get anything to market. So it can really create a downward spiral. So that's what a negative relationship loop looks like and feels like.
Yeah. That's, I don't know. It reminds me of, and you even mentioned in the book, Leadership and Self-Deception, about the collusion and how we don't even realize that we're in this downward spiral, and it's not. And sometimes we're not even saying the words. We're, like you said, we're picking up on body language and building off of that. And so I think that's a section people will actually find intriguing. And, getting a copy of your book would be a great next step for anyone who wants to better understand this. What's another step that you'd recommend? I'm thinking, for example, your XQ toolkit would be a good one, huh?
Yeah, one of the things with this book, this is my third book, and after working with thousands of leaders, these big ideas are always nice, and you can maybe get some insight from the big idea. That's great, and we need to put it into use right away. I mean, for someone who's busy, how do I just get a few tools that I can start using to have an impact on whatever I'm doing? And so, as you just mentioned, in my book, what I've done is I've actually put a QR code at the top of every chapter where you can actually watch a video of me describing why I wrote the chapter and what's in it. And then there's tools within each chapter, and I created a toolkit. You get the book and you just, send an email and you get a link to a whole PowerPoint, and there's an assessment, and there's a team building guide, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that allows for pretty much anyone to just start applying this to themselves individually, as a person, as a leader, or with their teams and organizations, so that it's as practical as possible. Because really, the best way to learn is through experience. Mm-hmm. And so this book and these tools are designed to just give people experiences implementing this stuff so they can learn quickly and get some value from it.
Yeah, I thought it was a great way to make the book even more personalized, having you and your videos and having access to those tools. That's nice. So much I'd love to talk to you about, Soren, but let's end with this. We have a lot of parents who listen to the podcast. Can you think of anything that parents could do to help develop XQ in their children as they grow?
That's a beautiful question. I think that, and the reason why I think it's a really important question is we all have experiences from the moment we're born, and we are all, especially as parents, creating experiences for those we love and care about. And so we have an opportunity to be more conscious of the kind of experiences we want to give to our children. So being able to expose our kids to a whole array of sports, cultures, arts and crafts, whatever it is, and help create experiences that instill what we care about. So, being able to be more mindful of the kind of experiences and what messages they're conveying. And, none of us parents are perfect either. Every parent screws up their kids in some way, I guess you could say, and argue. So, if that happens, if you make a mistake as a parent, one of the best opportunities is to not ignore it, but to acknowledge it and own it and process it in terms of the experience that it gave to your kid, and how you want to repair it, because those we're teaching as we have experiences at the same time. And so there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for parents to embrace building experiential intelligence, mindsets, abilities, and the knowledge that our kids end up getting. So I think that there's a whole field ready to be shaped and created using parenting and experiential intelligence that doesn't exist yet. Yeah. We don't have language yet for it, but I think it's ripe, and there's a lot of research, and there's probably some more work to be done in that area as well.
Yeah. Well, for those listening, if you've resonated with this discussion about XQ, get a copy of Soren's new book, Experiential Intelligence. I put links to the book and the book's website in the show notes for this cast. So, Soren, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
A real pleasure, Andy. Thank you.